to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scaleups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And this week's very special guest is Kevin Jurovich, former NFL player, finance dude, and now founder of Circles. Kevin, that was the worst intro ever. Can you share a little bit more info about yourself?
Finance dude. I like that.
Finance.
That was cool.
So we keep things casual here.
Hey, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. You and I have got to know each other over LinkedIn. It's been about a year or so. Yeah, man, happy to be here. Happy to just share my story, a little bit of things that I've done, things that I'm doing. A long time ago, I played in the NFL, and getting there, we can get into that, but that was a crazy story. Just even getting there, did that for 3 years, transitioned from that into finance. I was a private wealth manager in Palo Alto and Mountain View for Morgan Stanley. And then for Wells Fargo Advisors, I managed a lot of super wealthy founders' money, realized that I didn't want to manage their money. I wanted to make it myself. Started a company. Still haven't made as much as I would like to, but that's kind of my next mission. And I founded a company called Circles, which is basically it's TikTok meets Yelp. So it's visual video discovery in real time. Wow. We're excited about it. We got a team of 7. We've raised the pre-seed round. And we're chasing product market fit. So yeah, that's basically me.
So you are Dwayne Johnson in Ballers? Is that what I'm hearing?
Dude, Dwayne Johnson in Ballers. So that came out when I was maybe 2 or 3 years in. So I had already kind of my book of business was starting to kind of take off a little bit. I was feeling good. The only difference is when I got into finance, the whole reason I did it was, hey, I want to be the biggest and the best financial advisor to NFL players. Which, if you haven't seen the show, that's literally The Rock in the show called Ballers. The only issue is going from a peer playing with them to going to try to manage their money. That's a leap that not a lot of people are willing to take.
Yeah.
So I only, at the end of the day, only had 2 clients that were players. And the rest of my book of business was tech founders and just people in Silicon Valley, engineers that had stock options. And so that's really, even though tech was in my backyard and I was born and raised here, that's really what introduced me to tech and realizing, wow, this person who I can see their checking account at Wells Fargo went from 20K overnight to 25 million, that'll catch any young 26-year-old's eyes.
You said a couple things I want to unpack. You've mentioned biggest and best a couple times. And I think that's part of where people from a sports or a military background really have an advantage in the startup space. We've got a winning mentality. If we can't win, we don't want to play. And the second thing you said that's interesting. So years ago, when I was in sales and moved to sales management, it was a difficult transition because your fellow salespeople see you as a peer. And then when you jump up as a manager, it's difficult for everybody to have that difference in perspective. I can't help but wonder how similar it was to other players you knew, now trying to see you as the money guy, not the fellow meathead in the gym.
Totally. You try to do that fist pound and all of a sudden you're not fist pounding, you're trying to shake their hands, right? It's what the heck? This is different.
Exactly. And then you do the awkward shake, fish.
Yeah, we used to do the fist pound or the elbow pound, and now all of a sudden it's, hello, sir, I'm wearing a suit. Sit down in my office. Right? So that is crazy because that in life, I think this is beyond that experience, but in life, don't we we think things are going to unfold a certain way and we start going down a certain path. And then before we know it, we're not anywhere close to where we thought that destination was going to be. But I'm a huge 100%. Proponent of you go through these things and in the end, you never know when you're going through them. Why am I going through this? Why am I learning these things? It's only in hindsight, whether it's a new career later, a new relationship later, a new anything later, where we look back on it and say, oh, that was an amazing lesson. And I'm glad I learned it. But at the time, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I was frustrated I didn't have more of these clients. But thank God I kind of had more tech clients because it opened my eyes to completely different possibilities.
You got infected with the startup bug.
I did. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing yet, but I got it.
Circle back in 5 years and we'll talk again. I know my first exit was with a company called Apicero. We went from 0 to $250 million exit in 5 years. 0 to 2,500 employees, 9 offices, 3 countries, explosive 5 years, 7 days a week. Everything every LinkedIn guru tells you not to do, we did all of them. But we got the win in the end, and it was super exciting. But I saw I aged 15 years in that 5-year window.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really admire about speaking about LinkedIn, that's where, as Kevin had mentioned, we met, is your consistency on LinkedIn. I think that's an element a lot of folks miss. It's no good to go to the gym and have the best workout in the history of workouts if you follow it with 7 days of nothing.
I mean, it's very well said. This is like super simple advice, though. Like, as you're saying, this is what I'm thinking about. And people have heard this, but literally just
Yeah,
showing up, right? And the night before you go to sleep, writing down what would make today's Wednesday. So today I go to sleep. What would make Thursday a win? What are those like 2 or 3 things,
100%.
right? And then you wake up in the morning, you have your little roadmap, and it's just about being consistent. And if you can just show up and be consistent, eventually you will outduel 9 out of 10 people. Now there's going to be
Yeah,
that unicorn of a person that will never be, right? There's going to be those Elon Musks or those Mark Zuckerbergs that are just like so top tier, those Jeff Bezoses. And not everybody's cut out to be them, but that's totally okay. Showing up, being consistent with the little things, that's one thing I think I learned in sports, and that's carried over to business, and it's served me extremely well.
it's funny. Some people become almost offended when you give basic advice like that. They're like, "Oh, that's trite, that's simple," but it's around like that because it's true. It's just like every business seminar I've ever been into my life starts with belief as the foundation. Everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, everybody knows that." We're talking about it because not many people actually do it.
Yeah. If you don't believe that you can do something, or if you don't believe that you're worthy of having
Yeah,
something, you'll never ever have it. This is like
100%.
any industry I've ever gotten into, I've had to believe that number one, I'm worthy of it and that I can achieve it. And once you truly believe that, and then you kind of have a plan, you put it together and you start chipping away at it and seeing progress, it's addicting.
It absolutely is. And that belief thing is so subtle. This has been talked to death too. I feel like you and I are like recycling every cliche ever when I say this. But when the 4 minute mile was broken, before that, people thought it was unattainable. The year after it, like 5 or 6 other people did it. Why? Because they knew it could be done.
Yeah.
And they said, if he can do it, I can do it too. And then went out and they did it.
That's a great analogy.
So yeah, so Circles is your current startup, 7 folks, pre-seed. First of all, what got you there?
Yeah.
Why'd you think this is a good idea? And number 2, what's next for Circles?
So, yeah. So, first of all, anybody, and I think this is in B2B too, anybody that thinks that founders just come up with these brilliant ideas day one, this is never the case. So if you're a founder listening out there thinking like, I got this idea or I got this like kind of vision, but my idea is kind of half baked, that's awesome. Like the first version of your product, it's gonna suck. No
Yeah,
one is gonna care about it. And the only way that it's actually gonna get good is by putting it out there, talking to users and iterating and continuing to do that iterative process until you get to something good. So I just want to preface my answer with that because years ago when I had this idea, it was so far away from the current state of things. I thought, just like every other founder thinks, hey, I'm going to code this thing with a couple engineers and we're going to put this out there and everyone's going to love it. But how did we get to this point? It was literally like thousands of hours and a lot of conversations with a lot of different users and a lot of them telling us we like this, we don't like that. And now it makes perfect sense if you download it and you use it. It's like you shouldn't have to hop in an Uber and show up somewhere to see what it's like. You should know what a place is like before you even get there. That's kind of like the next evolution of discovery. Like
hmm
you should just look at a video instead of read some long review that Joe Schmo wrote 2 years ago. It's not as helpful, right? And some of these things in hindsight are like very obvious, but you only get there by kind of taking that next step. I always say, like, you're never going to know, founders, you're never going to know A to Z. You're never going to know the end game. All you got to know is where I am today. I'm at A. What's B look like, right? What's that next step? What's that next step that I need to take to get that next goal? And that's all you got to focus on. Once you get to that B, all of a sudden C appears, right? And like, oh shoot, okay, that's that next thing I have to do. So yeah, it's been a long story short, it's been an iterative process that I have a tremendous amount of respect for our team that has stuck through it, because finding product market fit is not easy. And I'm super thankful for all of our early adopters that played with a super clunky product and had the patience to stick with us.
That's awesome. I feel like I could start a sentence and you could finish it by just how in alignment we are. When I started Redbeard Solutions, it was frankly meant to be an Apicero clone. So the way that Apicero crushed the way it did was we found the hottest API software, formed a partnership with Salesforce, right place, right time. Salesforce is incredible to their partners. And they really helped us to grow, and we got to where we're acquired, we're out. So I was looking for the same thing in the cybersecurity space. So Redbeard's first iteration was to go find a cybersecurity tool that had a really healthy partner ecosystem. And I couldn't find it. There were the right combination I couldn't find. So I said to myself, what do you know best? Well, what about all we learned about growing Apicero, about creating a place where people want to grow? When we were growing Apicero, MuleSoft consultants were hard to find, and we were sucking them up as soon as they could be made, and they were staying with us. So I wrote the Destination Employer book, and now we went from being a cybersecurity tech Apicero clone to a company that helps startups and early stage businesses to develop incredibly high performing teams that don't leave. So
I love it,
you
man.
got to iterate and change.
You are in the long line of companies that have pivoted. And I write about this
Yeah.
a lot on LinkedIn, like Slack, right? Slack was a video game, which is like
Yes.
insane. Because what? It's a freaking communication tool at work. How's that a video game? What it was, right? You know, Instagram was a check-in app called Bourbon. I mean, the list of these sort of things goes on and on and on. And it sort of proves the point of like, even the biggest, baddest, sickest companies, they didn't have it figured out day one. Those founders, they're not any different than you and I, right? We know that now because we've been in the game a while. But I really like to drive that point home, because there's a lot of first-time founders that feel like I got to have all my ducks in a row.
Yeah.
It has to make sense to everybody. It doesn't. Like, it never does for almost anybody. So that's cool.
No, and you never really figure it all out. As a matter of fact, if you get mired down that, I think it just becomes avoidant behavior, giving yourself an excuse not to move forward, because you never have it all figured out. I thought I
Dude,
did after Apicero, and I proved that wrong right quick.
you know what I love? I love that you and I just literally, and this is funny, we literally just hopped on this. We didn't prep for this at all. And this is just off the cuff and it's flowing. I love it.
Yeah, but that's what this is. You know, I love. So this touches on something important, and that's community. When you get founders in a room together, it's crazy just how quick things like this flow,
Yeah.
because we're in the same fight. We have completely non-competitive services and products, so there's no reason for us to put up barriers or walls. And even if we did, I mean, who cares? We're both small companies still. You know, there's plenty of fish out in that ocean. But it's awesome to be able to talk to other founders. You don't feel alone. You've got a place to bounce ideas.
Yeah. I think I say this often. And right before this, you can't see on camera right now, but Jerry actually has a quote called "Man in the Arena," and I can't recite the whole quote because it's fairly long, but it's my favorite quote, and I actually should learn it all. It's right there.
Yep.
Basically, like I feel like every man and woman that's a founder, like that's them. We're in
Yes.
the arena, we're in the fight, we're crying, there's blood on our face, and if you read the quote, you know what I'm talking about. But to your points, like on my LinkedIn, I started writing literally for that purpose, because I felt like I had learned a lot. I had made a ton of mistakes, and I had recognized this is one of the hardest freaking jobs in the world. It's incredibly lonely at the top, and there's a lot of information in playbooks, and yet it's still very difficult to figure out which one you should listen to and which one you should adopt. And sometimes things are so individual that you can't even have a playbook, but there's just some guidelines. And I love helping founders. I love talking with other founders. If ever I can help them level up and not make a mistake that I made, I'm like the first person that I try to jump in just because like you get it too. It's hard. There's a
Yeah, this
lot of lonely, sad days and nights. And there's some amazing days and nights too, and it makes it worth it. But the majority of them aren't that.
Yeah, the school of hard knocks remains the best school in the world. But what a lot of people don't realize is it doesn't need to be your bruises. Somebody
Yes.
else can get those bruises for you, and you just learn their lesson.
Dude, it's like my older brother in life, right? Love my older brother to death. He got to show me all of what not to do. Like, what does bad
Exactly.
decisions look like? Just don't do what he did, and I'm gonna be good, you know? So I have a lot
Exactly.
of gratitude for him, kind of for showing me that path.
Exactly. Let him have the broken bones and broken nose. So that's awesome. Let me ask you this. We've talked a lot about this, so we touched on it a little bit already. But if you could give any founder out there one piece of advice,
Hmm.
what would that advice be, Kevin?
It's a good question. I think it would be kind of twofold. Number one, you're never going to be able to wait till you're fully ready to start a company. There's only so much time and studying and preparation that and waiting that you should do at some point. And I think it's when you kind of feel it deep in your heart, you got to jump, right? So I would encourage you, once you kind of get to that point, it's time to jump. When you jump out of the airplane, it's going to force you to get scrappy, and it's going to force you to get creative, and it's going to force you to figure stuff out with a sense of urgency that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's like the first piece that I think is extremely important. The other piece I would say is like try to tackle a problem that you have some level of passion for and some level of interest in beyond I just want to do this to make money, or I just want to do this because it's kind of interesting, because it's going to get crazy difficult. It's going to take way longer than you think. And if you have a certain level of passion and conviction for the problem, you're more likely to stick it out through those dark days.
This is going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this, Kevin? So,
I'm
again,
ready.
folks, this is totally unscripted. Kevin and I were talking. We hopped on this podcast and taped it just in media res. But I was talking to one of our mutual friends, Sebastian Spitzer, and I asked him the same question. And his answer was passion for darn
Oh,
near
I love
verbatim
it.
the same reasons.
I love it. We must be following each other on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I love that, and I agree totally, because frankly, the bad days, especially in the beginning, outweigh the good ones. So if you're passionate, it gives you the strength to string together between the bad days to get back to a good one. The second thing, if I could piggyback and add a little bit, is to celebrate your wins. That's
Yeah.
how you recharge your battery.
So easy to, I think our society these days, we get so focused. They call it destination syndrome, right? It's like we get so focused on when I get to this, I'll be happy. When I have that, I'll be happy, right? These are like some big goals we usually set aside, and we completely forget to celebrate all these little milestones along the way of
Mhm.
getting there. And not to be too wooey, but it's like happiness truly is an inside job. There's nothing that you're going to attain that's going to actually give you lasting happiness. It'll just be temporary. And so, really trying to find a space mentally and emotionally of like just living in a state of happiness, right? I think is super important.
Completely agree. And, I'll go the opposite and say I don't want to be morbid, but all of our stories end the same way. Everybody's story ends the same way. The question is, what do you do from now until that time? So if you can find something you're passionate about and focus on the things that bring you happiness and joy, your experience in getting to that same destination we all go to is going to be a lot different.
It's so true. There's this thing that I'm 38 now. Like I feel like in my late 20s and my early 30s, this is something I would remind myself a lot of. Like as I was doing a job or as I was like just going about my day, if I'm 80 years old and I'm in my rocking chair, like on my front porch, I want to look back on my life and feel proud and feel grateful and feel like I don't have major regrets. I'm pretty fortunate now. I'm 38. I don't have any major regrets at this point, and I feel like I know the next 38 years are going to be even more challenging. But like, yeah, you got to go for stuff. You got to, when something's on your heart or on your mind or like it's important to you, we get one life. And I think like thinking about it that way is like, at some point we're going to be 80, we're going to be on that rocking chair, hopefully. And yeah, let's look back on our life and be proud of it.
100%. If you when you look at circles, um, is there any part of it that you look back and say, "I wish I'd done something differently"?
We'd have to have a
That's a
whole
loaded
show
question.
dedicated to that, brother. But again, right? This is all part of life. Like, you, if you're a boxer, this analogy just came to me, right? How are you actually gonna really know how to duck and like block a hook? You're gonna know like technically, okay, you put this mitt up here in my chin, right? It's gonna take you to actually get a hook to the face to
Yeah,
really understand the importance of, okay, that's why I have to block, right? And all of these little scars and bumps and bruises, they make you a better founder. They make you a better person. It's just like practice in a sport too, right? Like you start something new, never be afraid to suck. Like you always got to be okay with being a beginner again. And as a beginner, ask a bunch of questions, take a lot of lumps, and you're just going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And pretty soon, you know, you're going to be sitting there. I don't feel like I'm the best CEO or founder in the entire world, but I feel like I'm better than a lot of people because I've been doing this job now for 5 years. So it's like, what would I do a lot different? I would do, there's a million things I would do differently because it would have saved a ton of time and money. But learning those lessons, like actually going through them and feeling the agony of them, it's nice to learn those on a smaller scale than, let's say we go raise our series A and we got 20 million in the bank and I overhire and the burn is 60K a month, like, and after 5 months we run through all of our money, or it's 160K a month, right? Like there's just lessons that I've learned that will prepare me for the next phase of our company.
yeah. A desire to be excellent at anything is predicated by a willingness to suck at it first. I couldn't agree with that
I
more.
like that.
It
Is that a
doesn't matter
famous
what it
quote?
is, huh?
Is that a famous quote? I feel like that's like a Mark Twain quote. That was so good.
You can attribute anything to either Mark Twain or not Abe Lincoln, Benjamin Franklin.
I love
You're
it. That
safe
was a
bet.
good,
Like eighty
that was a
percent
really
of
good
all good
quote.
quotes come from those guys. But the other thing you said that I think we need to unpack there that's important is learning the lessons along the way. It's funny. So prior to Redbeard and Apisaris, I said that was kind of an evolution, taking those senior roles. I worked with about 120 different companies, and in the 10 years that I did that, I grew more in that 10 years than the 20 years before because I got to work closely with companies, learn what worked, what didn't work, and then fast forward to my own company, Redbeard, and I would be surprised if I didn't repeat every damn thing I knew better than. Like literally, companies would hire me to help them not make mistakes. I made all of those mistakes in my own company.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
How great is a founder? It's like I'll hire a founder any day. Like an ex-founder that failed, that's like you might as well go to Stanford. Cause I know you know what it's like to take chances. I know you know what it's like to wear a bunch of different hats, to work in uncertainty, to be self-motivated. Like there's so many qualities about just starting a company and giving it a go that yeah, most of the time it's not going to work out, but the person, you come back almost like a soldier from 300, you know?
Yes, 100%. Hopefully, minus the arrows. But the thing about being a founder, yeah, it's there's so many. You have to hold so many contrary thoughts in your head. Like you have to be ready to pivot if you're off track, but you also have to be super resilient. You have to have unshaken confidence, but you have to be
Yeah,
open to new ideas. There's just
totally.
so many like oppositional thoughts in your head that I can't think of any other role where you have that.
I think I always say like you should you should be pretty strict with your vision, but you need to be flexible in how you get there. So it's like
Yeah,
that's the top of the mountain. We can't plan the entire route even though I know mountain climbers do this, but forget about them.
Yeah.
Like you can't plan the entire route just from the very bottom looking at the top. You have to be willing to like, oh, okay, I gotta go back a couple days. Okay, let's try this way. But okay, that's the vision. That's where I want to get to. I want to get to the top, and you got to keep that, right? You can't let the detours discourage you from kind of reaching that pinnacle.
Yeah, 150% yes. So let me ask you one more question, and then floor is yours. There's anything else you want to cover. Um, if you could, how can I say this? If you could take any mistake you made specifically at circles as you were growing and redo it without the answer, obviously you know the outcome. That makes it easy. What would you have done differently? Would it be bringing
I
somebody
already
else?
know. I already
What's
know.
that?
I already know the answer. So, and I think this is super applicable for anybody that wants to start a company. So let's say like you're this founder, let's say you're non-technical or you're
Yep.
technical, doesn't matter. You have an idea. Everybody rushes into hiring an engineer or like literally starting to code their app. This is what everybody does. This is the wrong way to go because you're going to spend tons of money and time building something and you haven't even validated it.
Yep.
So the number one piece of advice that I give first time founder, second time founder, any founder, all you got to do, it's like building a house. The first thing you got to do is you got to hire an architect. An architect in software is a designer.
Yeah.
You're going to sketch every single screen out. You're going to work with that person. In 1 week, you'll have a flow of the entire app in your mind. You'll make a bunch of changes. And then you can go take that and go talk to potential users. You can have a checklist of questions to ask and you can ask them, right? And I think the things that you'll realize is there's a lot of changing and switching and realizing what's important and what's not and where to put certain buttons and what makes sense and what's clear and what isn't. And all of that stuff is done in a matter of days. And you're paying the person $60 an hour versus it took 3 months to build that first version only to realize it sucks and nobody likes it. So hiring a designer, sketching it all out, go talk to users, get some surveys, get some info. Super light. I'm not talking about doing market research for months, but then you're going to have more conviction into what to actually build. Then once we have the flow of all the app with those discovery interviews and all of those meetings with potential users, now you actually have something that has a higher chance to succeed and get built. When you go hire engineers, you pull up the Figma doc and you say, this is what I'm building. Right? It's all right there.
I can't tell you how many founders I've talked to that have gotten knee deep in development of their product and then finally talked to their user base and realized that they were way off track.
This
Nobody
is
was interested.
99% of people. And anyone listening to this, most of you are going to say, oh, shoot, I was going to do it that way. But don't do it
Yeah.
that way. Do it this way.
When I wrote my book, I went through the whole first draft and then I approached people that it was written for as beta readers. I wound up cutting about 90 pages out of it. It just
Even in
wasn't
sports
relevant.
teams, like what do you think training camp is for? We literally practice all these plays. We figure out which plays work, which don't. We scrap the ones that don't. And then we had 2 months worth of practicing them. And now we go play a game. It's the same thing.
It applies everywhere. My youngest son is a guitarist and a singer in a band. When they make music, they'll get together, they'll figure it all out, then they'll play it for their friends, and the friends are like, and they'll rewrite it then before they go out in front of a real crowd.
You know what I just heard? So this guy, Mike Posner, I don't know if anyone knows who that is, but that one song is like, if I could write you a song to make you fall in love. Have you heard the song? Have you heard
Yep.
it? Okay. So anyways, he had been working on music for 12 years and no one really liked his music. Randomly, his mom sends him a message after she heard the song and said, I like this song. Right. And he's like, my mom never told me she liked any of my songs. She was supportive, but she never did. And then later that night at a sorority party, all the girls at the sorority were singing the hook and the DJ played the song twice. Right. So he's like, now I got sorority girls who are 20, my mom who's 60, and they both like this. Like something's going
That's
on here.
something. Yeah.
Right. And that ended up being his like lead single. So it's to this point, right? Just listening for those kind of cues.
100% yes. Well, listen, this is a thrown together impromptu show. Kevin, anything you'd like to add? I think we covered a ton of material.
I'm on LinkedIn. Any founders, if this was like helpful for you, if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn. When you send a connection, just say, "Hey, I listened to the pod, so I know that I can accept it," because there's a lot of pending in there. And yeah, let's help each other out. And 2025 is closing quickly. Let's go hard, man. Let's finish this year strong.
100% yes. And for long-term listeners, Kevin's LinkedIn profile website will be in the show notes, so you can get it there. Don't crash your car if you're listening to this somewhere. You can grab it there. And Kevin and I met on LinkedIn, so I can vouch for that. His LinkedIn content is consistent. It's humble. It's thought-provoking. Occasionally funny, not as funny as mine, but pretty close. But you'll love it. So I strongly recommend that. Kevin, thanks very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I had a blast, man. Thanks for having me.
Everybody else, have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.